Good evening, and welcome to the Way Out Show. I'm your host, Dane McCarthy, broadcasting to you from FEMA Region 5, deep in the bowels of the United Police State of Amnesia. Today is April 30th, 2015, and as always, there's a lot going on in the news, and I'd really like to spend most of this hour talking about the rioting in Baltimore, which is now spreading to other cities, and how it happened and where it might be going. I'm also going to show you a clip from InfoWars, which gives you some pretty good insight, I think, into the reason behind why these riots seem to be springing up like spring mushrooms in the forest. First of all, let's look at the way these things have gone in the past. Many American cities have experienced rioting periodically with looting over the years, at least since the 60s. And actually, there were riots in New York City, for instance, during the Civil War. People get very upset and get out of control. But one aspect of it that the mainstream media, the state-run media, rarely comments on, if ever, is the smoke and mirrors aspects of rioting. How are protesters, peaceful protesters, turned into violent looters and people who are just out to destroy? This is something that is not necessarily completely spontaneous. There are aspects, there are people called agents provocateurs that do mingle with the crowd, and they're actually working for the other side. They may be working for the local government, the federal government, the FBI, the police, and they're oftentimes police officers themselves who get people riled up deliberately and try to get them to become violent. Why is that? Because it's the perfect scenario to shut the protest down. It's very difficult to shut down a peaceful protest which is just simply exercising its right of free speech, its right to peacefully assemble. And so the effort is to get the protesters to break the law. And oftentimes, we saw this in the 60s, at the anti-war and the anti-draft protests, and even in civil rights situations, where the agent provocateur would be the guy with the longest hair, the most radical of the protesters, and he would be the one who would be urging everybody on to turn violent. A good example of this is Kent State. There was a guy who, and I don't remember his name, in Kent, who was trying to incite the students who were protesting the Vietnam War to attack, burn, destroy. He also had a gun. And it has been shown over the years that the Kent State shots that were fired were probably shot by this guy who was sort of not in the forefront of the students. And this gave the National Guard the signal to fire. It was also, of course, the corollary that was discovered through the digitally enhanced audio from that horrifying incident in which 4 American college students were killed. There were 9 altogether killed and injured in this barrage of gunfire directly into the crowd. And the National Guard said that they heard gunshots, and they were probably by this guy who had this gun, who was actually working for the official in the official capacity. He was, oftentimes these are people who are like drug dealers and things who are arrested, and then they're given a deal by the police: work for us and we'll reduce your sentence or we'll let you off. And and they pay the money too sometimes. And so they have a very strong motivation for their own survival to work with the police. And maybe they think that I can redeem myself in their eyes or my own eyes, and do something against these crazy radicals, these students, these protesters, anti-war protesters, whatever they're protesting. And so this, in the Kent State incident, has been shown that there was some efforts to engineer, to control the situation, to turn it around, to make it look like the protesters were the aggressors. And so that's just one example. And right now we have a burgeoning cycle of violence and protests. And people do tend to jump on the bandwagon, especially in these areas in which there's a lot of poverty and there's a lot of frustration, and the police are predators and parasites against the local population, milking them, harassing them, beating them up, breaking into their houses, stopping them on the street, driving while black, stopping them in their cars for the most minor things. I saw, and then, this builds up, and you have the hopelessness of a country in which many of our jobs have been shipped overseas. And this is not just the Republicans doing this, the Democrats have been doing this too. Remember, NAFTA and GATT came about under the Clinton administration, a Democratic administration. This, according to Ross Perot, remember, way back when he said there would be a giant sucking sound of jobs going to Mexico. Well, it turned out that Mexico was only the first stepping stone in the drain of good jobs leaving the United States. And it turned out to be other countries all over the world as the multinational corporations drove wages to the bottom. They kept, they're looking for the lowest common denominator. They're looking around the world for the best deal they can get on the workers, the ones who will charge the least, the most desperate, the most hungry, the most oppressed workers in these awful dictatorships, oftentimes supported by the United States government. It's all about business and the bottom line profits for the big guys and the big-time investors, the investors that are always looking to increase those profits. That's what it's all about. So, this scam has been going on for a long time. Nero, the emperor of Rome, the Roman Empire, used provocateurs to burn down, this is supposedly true history, to start fires and blame it on Christians in Rome. Remember the famous story, Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Well, why would he fiddle? He fiddled because he wanted it to burn. He was in charge of it. It was urban renewal. Part of it was urban renewal. He could get rid of a lot of the older buildings, the wooden buildings, and replace them with his grand design for the new stone, beautiful Rome that he wanted to build. But also he could make the Christians look bad. These crazy cult Christians who were causing trouble and bringing in this weird religion. So this is nothing new. We have to accept this as a possible motivation for why this is happening. We must always look at this. Okay, there are some people out there who go crazy and look, and they're opportunists, and they'll if they have an opportunity to loot a place, they will loot it. But we have to look also is why is that, are the black people in these communities really targeting black businesses to burn down? These are mom and pop stores, a lot of them. A senior center burnt down in that area in Baltimore. Are these really the local people who are doing this? Or are these people who are from somewhere else, or they're paid, maybe, to burn down and clean out these areas? Maybe they want to disperse this neighborhood that they see as problematic and replace it with nicer buildings that are already there. Again, urban renewal. So I have a clip, and you can look at it, and then I will get back to you and make comments on it.
Did authorities in Baltimore deliberately stand down during yesterday's civil unrest and allow riots to spread? Weasel Zippers is citing Fox News in reporting that when journalists asked police why they were not responding to stop the rioters, they were told by the officers, quote, "Ask the mayor," clearly implying they had been told not to move and told to stand down while Baltimore burned. Of course, we had the unbelievable comments made by Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake on Saturday night after the original sporadic violence, when she legitimised the rioting by saying, quote, "We also gave those who wish to destroy space to do that as well." And of course, after intense criticism, she tried to walk back those comments rather unsuccessfully, because it was a brazen admission of the fact that they had anticipated these violent outbursts and in some way facilitated them. So then we fast forward to Monday morning. The police become aware of this flyer, which is being circulated widely among city school students via social media. It's also reported on by the press about a purge set to take place at 3 p.m. starting at Mondawmin Mall. So that morning, the police were aware of the precise location and time where this looting and rioting was set to begin. And yet, what did we see at 3 p.m. and afterwards at the Mondawmin Mall? People literally driving up in cars, stealing, looting handfuls of clothing and other goods. Not a police officer in sight, despite the fact they knew the time and the location where this was about to take place. And there are conflicting reports about this amidst the chaos. Some reports say that police were there, at least in small numbers, before the rioting started, but were then pulled to other locations as the violence escalated in other areas, which then led to more looting of the mall. So then Mayor Rawlings Blake waits at least 5 hours after all this chaos is unfolding to even make a statement. And then she gives this bizarre press conference at which she seems more angry and irate at the media for picking up on her previous comment about allowing space for the looters to destroy than anger directed at the actual rioters and looters themselves. And this rhetoric was then echoed by other Baltimore officials who blamed the media for not focusing enough on the, quote, peaceful protests, as if they were larger in number than these riots that had swept the whole city. By that time, there were no peaceful protests whatsoever, so what on earth are the media supposed to cover? So again, instead of condemning the rioters, their anger seemed to be more focused on blaming the media. And then again, unbelievably, Mayor Rawlings Blake comes out and says that the curfew won't be imposed that night, that it will be imposed the next night. So again, giving the looters and the rioters more safe space. Now you can argue that they would have taken no notice of the curfew whatsoever, and maybe that's a reasonable argument. But what kind of message does it send from the mayor to say, oh no, you can have tonight, tonight's free. We're not going to impose a curfew until tomorrow, so go ahead and have more fun. Completely bizarre. So then Maryland Governor Larry Hogan comes out and says he's glad she finally did call for a state of emergency and the National Guard. So obviously he was implying that she had waited too long. And again, She waited 5 hours merely to make a statement on the issue at all. And some people are asking the question, this safe spaces that people who wanted to destroy could use, according to the mayor, were police cars part of that process? Why are abandoned police cars parked outside this payday lender, which was looted by the rioters? And why were all these abandoned police cars just there to be smashed in and set on fire? Was that part of the safe space for the looters to destroy? And this idea of a stand down is not without precedent. Of course, during the Ferguson riots last year, Governor Jay Nixon, despite having the National Guard on standby for a week, on the worst night of rioting and looting in Ferguson, when black-owned businesses were being burned to the ground, ordered the National Guard to stand down after reportedly being pressured by Obama. So this stand down wasn't the fault of the police. It was the fault of Mayor Rawlings Blake and her minions in Baltimore. She was the one who gave legitimacy to the riots in the first place by saying that people who wished to destroy would be given space to do so. She waited for 5 hours even to make a statement on the riots, never mind call up the National Guard, which only came afterwards. And now we have reports that it was her responsible directly for not allowing the police to intervene in the riots. Absolutely shocking, but we already saw a similar set of circumstances in Ferguson, Missouri. Whose side is this woman on? And why is she inflaming the tensions as Obama, Holder, and the administration in general has done since the first riots in Ferguson, Missouri, giving them credence and legitimacy as black-owned businesses are burned to the ground, as communities are destroyed, as people are terrorized? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Was this just a botched response to these riots, or was it, as the reports suggest, a deliberate stand down? Check out the other videos, subscribe to the channel. I'm Paul Joseph Watson for Infowars.com.
All right, we're back. I hope you enjoyed that clip from Infowars. Paul Joseph Watson is really on the ball. And you got to look at the mayor of Baltimore acting very strangely, in a way, giving those who want to destroy the space that they need. I mean, come on. Would any mayor actually get up there in a press conference and say this unless she or he were instructed to do so? And I believe that she was instructed to do so. She was getting her orders from somewhere higher up, probably the White House. It's all about getting the whole country focused on race relations, on all these problems that have been with us for a very long time, and really distracting the American public from all these other issues like the Trans-Pacific Partnership that they want to get through college on fast track without any debate. Why? Why do they want to not debate the Trans-Pacific Partnership? Why do they not want Congress to even look at the details of this huge treaty, which actually what it does is give away a lot of the sovereignty of the United States? People in the United States are going to be suffering as a result of this. They want the transatlantic partnership too. That's another issue. And it's all about creating a free-flowing, globalized market, which makes NAFTA and GATT look relatively minor. This is NAFTA and GATT on steroids. This is what I've heard. That, in other words, any protections that the American worker has, they are going to be diluted more and more and more. Now, Bernie Sanders, the Vermont senator, who has now thrown his hat into the ring and now has just announced that he's going to be running for president. He is against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, he is an avowed socialist and an independent, but he wants to run as a Democrat. But even though some people may say, well, of course, well, he's against it. You'd think that a socialist would want to have a globalized one world government. They love big government, right? Socialism. But so this seems to go against the tenets of Bernie Sanders' philosophy or political viewpoint. But you could say also that, okay, well, he genuinely is concerned about the plight of the American worker, and therefore he's against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Whereas somebody like Obama, Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush, these people are all financed by and run, essentially, owned by big business, by Wall Street, by the enormous multinational corporations, by the big banks. They call the shots, they run the show, they're not elected, but they provide the big money to actually get their, policies enacted through their boy or their woman, their girl, to get in there and get it done for them. So it's really one of those deals where they're not really looking out for the best interest of the American public. Americans have to realize this, that we're being played, we're being used, we're being lied to. We are under an intense level of social engineering. And what do I mean by that? Social engineering. We are all living we're being marinated. We're in a big soup pot in America here, in which every day, every hour, every aspect of our lives is being influenced by powerful forces that are trying to direct us in a certain way, to believe certain things, to refuse to believe other things. Just this idea of the word conspiracy theorist. The label of conspiracy theorist or insane, let's say, they both are used almost, he's an insane conspiracy theorist. Or he's a conspiracy theorist and he's insane. And oftentimes these are slapped on people for opinions that diverge from the main way of thinking. And it's like the social engineering wants everyone to think in only a certain way and just follow in this deep groove that's very narrow and deep and straight. And don't look at anything on this side, don't look at anything on this side, don't look at anomalies, don't notice them. Even if they don't fit in to the story, the narrative that's being created, the reality that's being created for us, then we must pretend that they're not there. And that's like in the old days when they used horses to draw carriages and so on. They would put black squares on either side of the horse, blinders. They would blind the horse from being able to see out of its periphery. It could only see straight ahead. This is exactly what the media, the corporations, the banks, the government, all one conglomeration, more and more, are attempting to do. And the spread of the riots that we're seeing now into New York City, there's a lot of people arrested in New York City, and by some prognosticators, they would say that we're going to see more of this throughout the summer. And of course, intense media coverage of certain aspects of these riots. One thing that the mainstream media does not cover so much is the efforts by the police to actually make the situation worse. Nothing new here, but the police do try to run the show and get the people in a situation where they feel threatened and forced into a corner, and they will explode with anger and cause more trouble. And again, they can always send in those provocateurs. And I've told the story before about how many times we saw this in Seattle with the Black Bloc, the anarchists, so-called anarchists, who were very clearly working for the police. They're being paid by the police. They wear black. Their faces are covered. They're the most violent of the protesters by far. And the other protesters saying, "Who are you people? Why are you here? Why are you doing this? This is a peaceful protest. Why are you burning this police car? Why are you breaking these windows?" And then they surround them. This has happened many times because the protesters are getting wise to these agents provocateurs. And they're corralling them and they're surrounding them sometimes. And they'll say, "Put that rock down. Are you planning to throw that rock? What are you trying to do? Ruin this protest? There's women and kids in this protest line. Are you trying to get them hurt? What is wrong with you? Who are you? Let me see your face." And they'll run up and pull their face down, their face mask down, and they're really mad, and it turns out they're cops. They're cops, and they've been caught wearing the identical boots. The cop boots, the same ones that the line of cops with the face masks and the shields are wearing, that they're carrying. And these are agents provocateurs, no question about it. They're tough-looking men, strong guys, big guys, who are pretending to be protesters. So that, why? Why would they do that? Because then the police have a pretext to crack down on the protesters and drive them out and arrest them and beat them up and drive them and hurt them. And that's what they do. And I'm quite certain that this happened in Ferguson, and this is happening in Baltimore. Mother Jones had an article. I was just reading it yesterday. The reports from this mall in Baltimore that was looted. It was looted. It started out with tweets, and somebody gets this thing going. Where these tweets are saying, "Oh, everybody's going to meet. A lot of these young kids are going to meet at this big mall in Baltimore." Cops know about it. What do? There's a school nearby. They prevent the school buses from picking up the kids, from even entering the school grounds. The kids who are on the buses, they unload them from the buses and force them to stay there. And many of them, obviously, if they're on a school bus, they don't live in the neighborhood. They have to be bused. And so they're stuck there. Their parents are probably at work oftentimes. They can't come and pick them up. So they're stuck there at this mall. And so then the reports start coming in that there's a large group of young people at this mall wandering around. And then out of nowhere, all of a sudden these looters start coming in. And that's also promulgated by social media. But who started it? Told them, "Hey, there's easy pickings. Come in and take what you want." The police won't be there. It won't be an issue. They actually stand back and they let all the looting take place. And the cameras are rolling, and it's being shown all over the world. And it makes the protesters look bad. Really, really bad. To see them running in and out, taking stuff out of the... And we see this over and over. So we can expect in the summer to see more of this. And people have to become aware that they have a clever plan, and this is what they're taught to do. They talk about this. Police are well known, particularly in big cities, for framing people. They will buy illegal guns, like guns that were involved in a crime or something, and they call them drop guns. In other words, and if they've just shot someone, and they say, well, he tried to pull a gun on me, they just drop the gun, and there is the gun right next to the dead guy lying there in the street. And they say, there's the gun. They do the background check on the gun. They find out where it came from, and oh yeah, this is a stolen gun. Well, the cop had the gun. They do it with apparently knives too. Drop knives, drop gun. Oh, he pulled a knife on me. And there is no question about it that the police are being hired who are willing to pull the trigger more often. They're being militarized. And now with the new violence that's coming out of Baltimore and probably soon to spread to other cities where hopelessness is just so out of control. I mean, these young people, they don't have a lot to do in their lives. They don't feel like their lives are going anywhere. If the opportunity arises to loot, they feel like they might as well grab some goodies. And they are being robbed. And maybe you could say, well, the mayor of Baltimore was actually sympathetic to the rioters and understood their desperation and didn't want to get them hurt by calling in the police, so she deliberately asks or tells the police to stand down. But what about the actual store owners themselves? The ones who was getting their stores looted, the ones whose stores are being burned, don't they deserve the protection from the police that their taxpayer money is going to provide that service? How dare the mayor of Baltimore, no matter what her sympathies with the motivations of the protesters, how dare she actually order her police to stand down? Well, it's because she's working with the people who are higher than she is up in federal government. And what's the motivation for this? It's all about creating a problem, then seeing how that plays out, the reaction, and then reacting to that with a solution. Problem, reaction, solution. And we see this used over and over. This is a way to further your agenda, and the agenda is to more and more put the police, the local police, under one federally run agency, militarized, federalized, across the board. You've noticed over the years that the police are going to the black uniforms. Now, it used to be in the 40s and the 50s and before, and even into the 60s, that local police would have their own specially customized, tailored uniform. It might be green with yellow bands, with fancy shirts with like the flaps for the pockets would be maybe different color, that have fancy buttons. And they were sometimes really elaborate and quite colorful uniforms. And they were distinctive, so that the local people could tell that this is one of our guys here. He's a local police officer. I can trust him. He's from my town. And we can talk, we can communicate. But when you have this black uniform that is identical, you can't tell necessarily that this is a local cop. And now they're suiting up in this layers of heavy armor. You can't see their face, and oftentimes you can't see who it is either, because you don't. It used to be that the name, they would have the badge, they would have the name, the badge number was prominently displayed on the police officer's uniform. Now, with all this armor that they're wearing, you don't know who it is. You can't even see their face. So it's a faceless, it's like something out of a science fiction movie, a 1984 or a Star Wars, where they're dehumanized. And they're trained to look more and more at the American people as an enemy combatant to be dealt with in the harshest possible manner. You don't talk with them, you just deal with them. And they're a potential threat, and more cops are saying, you know, I felt threatened and I had to shoot him. Turns out to be nothing. American people do not want to get in a fight with the federal government. But I think the federal government, and many others, I feel that the federal government wants to get in a fight with the American people. Why? Because it will enhance their power, they think. And this is the way things have gone. You have a very, very small group of extremely wealthy people at the very top who have a plan. And it's a very old plan, and it's a plan for complete domination of the human species on all levels, in all aspects of life. And these people are ambitious, they're intelligent, they're very educated, they're clever, they're creative, and they're hard workers. That's how they got, oftentimes, to this position of power and wealth in the first place. Because these guys don't just play, they work. They're workaholics. I mean, for them to put in a 12, 14, 16, 18-hour day, that's normal. That's normal for them. Whereas the average American is trying to work as little as possible. And they spend a lot of their time just sort of playing, goofing off, playing, doing things that give them pleasure. And it's a way, partly that decadence, the American decadence. They don't want to run their own lives so much because it's just too much trouble. It's easier to turn the responsibility of being an adult over to a larger entity and just say, you just take care of me. I'm going to play the role of the child. You will play the role of the parent. And I'm happy with that. I'm content with that. You tell me what is going to happen, and I'll just follow along with it. I just want to have fun. I'm tired of being an adult. I like being a permanent child, and it's easy and fun, and so whatever. Well, unfortunately, in a democracy, in a republic, if we want to continue to live in a republic, we cannot do that. We must be active participants in the ruling of our own lives, or else someone else will take over the ruling of our own lives for us. They will be more than happy to step in, to use us, to abuse us, to rob us, even to murder us, if we let them. But the answer is not to actively and violently resist. That is not the first choice. That is the absolute last choice, and you don't want that to happen. When that happens, then it almost never works out well, because new tyrannical forces just rise up through the ranks of the violent revolutionary force, and you get just the same thing all over again. No, the only way that this can be dealt with is through education, through understanding, through perspicacity, through erudition, through really seeing through the motivations of those who are oppressing you, and to do your due diligence, to do your homework, to find out what's really going on. We have to do this. It's coming down to that, where we have no more choice. We must really search. And people make fun of the internet. Oh, you can't believe everything on the internet. A friend of mine said, you know what? This internet, it's so full of lies and half-truths and just these wild, crazy nutcases, these tinfoil hat people, these conspiracy theorists who are coming up with these crazy stories that are not true. You know, where is the integrity? He goes, where is the journalistic ethics? Well, hey, they're gone. They're gone in the mainstream state-run media as well. The lie of omission is the most damaging type of lie, where you don't even hear about it. You know, you only get part of it. You're not getting the whole story. You're only getting part of the story. And you have to make your decision on incomplete information about what's really going on. No solutions to a problem, no answers are given out by the mainstream media. They're not there to, they say, they're not there to give out answers, but only to show both sides of an issue. Well, there's a problem with that, because if you have an issue and you're showing both sides as if, well, let's hear from this guy. Well, let's see, here's his point of view. And he says, oh, this is just the best thing that could ever happen. This is wonderful. This is really going to be great. Okay, let's hear from the other person. And then this person says, it's awful, it's horrible, it's not an answer, it's just terrible, it's going to be awful. And then you say, okay, well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your interesting perspectives. And let's go on to the next news item. And you're sitting there scratching your head going, did I actually learn anything? Or did I learn absolutely nothing? And the reality is that you learned nothing. You don't know who's right. And people just go, I just give up. I give up, you know. It's so pointless. It becomes ridiculous. It's like, well, you know what? That's just the way they deliberately do business. That's what they do. They actually want people to be confused and bored and puzzled, baffled, frustrated, annoyed, so they just give up. No. The chances are that one of those guys is telling the truth and one of those guys is telling a lie. And you have to use your investigative skills to try to really look into what's being said. We need to do the research. It's the only way. It's not an easy way. Now, fortunately, in the alternative media, there are people who will do that research for you, and they will give you a pretty accurate rundown and boil down of the situation, and oftentimes these guys are either paid very little or nothing, and they just do it because they want to get the information out. And again, of course, some of these guys are wrong. Some of them are maybe weird and crazy. I don't know. But that's happening in the mainstream state-run media as well. And it's more insidious because the state-run media is consolidating into only 6 mega corporations who run the show, who all have more or less the same motivations. They want to make big profits. And they also are going to support the narrative. the main narrative, the history. It's like the history of the world. What can we look forward to in the future in concerning the history of the world? As globalization gets more and more powerful, as it spreads to every corner of the planet, there is going to be a drive towards harmonization of history, where all history is told from a single point of view. There are no contradictions in what happened in history. It'll all be harmonized. So that when you read the history of the world, it will be the same story whether you're in Russia, whether you're in America, or South America, Europe, Africa. It will be the same story. And people will say, well, that's good. It's a single system. It's that way you won't be confused about what happened. You won't have all these contradictions that we have now. I mean, the people of Japan tell the history of World War II differently than the people of the United States or Europe. The people of Japan get a different take on what happened during World War II, which tends to favor their country. And as you can see why, it's for political reasons, to allow the Japanese people to feel good about themselves. The Germans have a different take on World War II history. The Americans like to tell the U.S. history in like that the Americans basically won World War II. That's what we're told. The Russians have a different take on World War II history, and they emphasize the role of Russia in winning World War II and defeating the Nazis. And so in the future, with computerization, everything computers, everything centralized, everything digitalized, then more and more it becomes one story, one narrative, instead of lots and lots of conflicting narratives. And you see where this is leading. In other words, much information which seems to be an anomaly is left out. And it's the very antithesis of the idea of diversity. And a lot of people tout diversity. We need diversity. But what are we getting? We're getting the exact opposite. Diversity is a good thing. Very good thing. We need that. But if you see the way things are going, it seems to be the opposite. If we want diversity, why do we want federalization of police? And you would say, well, because, look, the police are out of control. Look at them killing all these black men. And they are shooting black men. There's no doubt about it. They're also shooting white men and white women and black women and white women and dogs. They're shooting a lot nowadays. And you might wonder, well, why? What's going on here? And that is part of their training, that number one is you protect yourself, and if you see a threat, then you shoot and you try to kill. You don't just wound, you try to kill them. I just saw a video about a black guy who got stopped by a police officer for wearing no seatbelt. He was in a gas station parking lot. The black guy comes out of his car when the police officer tells him to get out. The police officer says, I want to see your license and registration. He turns around, leans into his car, just immediately, absolutely responds to that order instantaneously. And that freaked the cop out. And he started shooting him. And I don't know how many times this black guy got shot, but you could see him jerking. He got shot in the hip. You could see him go like this right away. He backs up, his hands are up, and the cop is still shooting him. I don't know how many times he got shot. Apparently the guy lived, but he was actually conscious, and you could hear him. This is all on the dash cam of the police car. This was recorded. He falls back, I guess on the ground. You could hear him very clearly. "Why did you shoot me, sir?" So pathetic. I mean, I don't think this was faked. I think this was real. "Why did you shoot me? Why did you stop me?" "Oh," he said, the cop says, "well, because you weren't wearing a seatbelt." He said, I just took it off. I was about to, I was pulling into the parking lot. And I took my seatbelt off. And I was just reaching to get my license and registration and you shot me. Why did you shoot me?" He says, just hang in there. We're going to get you help. So the cop's attitude changes. He got in trouble for that. Apparently he got fired and now he's under indictment, I guess, for assault and battery. That would be, minimum. And it was an awful thing to see. I think there is some fakery going on. I don't believe that this South Carolina shooting was real. It just seemed really phony to me, like a really badly acted little play that was being put on. I know that sounds crazy. People think I'm completely nuts when I say that. But I'm not the only person who thinks that of that particular incident in South Carolina where the guy was shot in the back. Because there's a guy filming it very close. The police look at him at least twice, don't appear to see him even though he's very close. The guy's lying on the ground. He doesn't have any blood on him. There's no blood on his back. The black police officer who comes over after the white police officer shoots the guy, supposedly shoots the guy, pulls up the guy's shirt. I don't know why. He's lying on his stomach, pulls it up, exposes his back. There's nothing on his back. There's no blood anywhere. No holes. You can see it pretty clearly because the guy who's on the other side of the fence is actually got his camera filming the whole thing, and the police never notice him. Normally the police, if they see you filming them, especially when a police officer just shot a guy, how is he not going to see that guy when he turns his head and looks right at him? And yet he ignores him. It was almost like right after he shot off, he emptied his gun 8 times at this guy who's running away. Not running very fast. He looks right over like, did you see that? Did you get that? Now I could be wrong, I don't know, but it sure seemed strange to me, this particular incident. These others, I think they're real, but for some reason this one seemed fake. Why would that be? Because again, they have a plan. They're trying to bring the control of the police into the purview of the federal government so they can run the show better. Remember, police, military are pushing for the same goals. As the wars in Central Asia and the Middle East wind down, a lot of that military equipment is being given to local police forces. So they have military equipment, heavy duty MRAPs, big stuff, big guns, sound cannons, high-tech stuff, which they can roll out, even in some of these really small towns. And they are training. They have this Jade Helm training exercise, which is happening in many states this summer. A big deal. Coming in to local towns, fully armed, playing war games on the streets of America, the main street. I think it's going to scare people. They're going to have the helicopters, the planes, and it's going to be a full-scale mock war in the United States this summer. And what does this mean? Does this mean that this could go live? That's what they do it, call it going live. A lot of these drills are, strangely enough, they go live. And it just so happens that a real bomber happens to set off a real bomb at the exact same time as a drill is being run at the exact same time at the exact same place. Coincidence? I think not. So that's all there is for today. Have a great weekend and sleep well, folks.